So, now it's time for questions. I still have hearing problems. Yeah, but that's not enough. You see, it's just because I want to say anything. That's the point. If you speak fast, I won't understand what you said. You need to speak clearly and slowly as well as loud. The microphone will help with the loud part, but it won't help with the clearly and slowly part. So you have to do that. Please come up here and make a line at the microphone to ask your questions. This method is superior because A, it's efficient, we don't have to waste time dragging the microphone around, and B, it's very fair because when you get into the queue, you know you'll have your turn.
Thank you for an excellent talk. I have a... Sure. I want to ask you specifically about the non-derivatives license that you use on your works of opinion. So I appreciate that you made a point tonight of emphasizing the value of remix culture and a lot of the other types of elements of sharing that are very valuable. One of the things that I would think of that's not a remix would be, for example, translations into different languages.
That's right. I want us to check translations.
Okay.
You know, we publish my essays that are related to free software on gnu.org, and we have translation teams. We want to publish translations, but we don't want to just let anybody publish translations, because what if they're lousy or wrong?
Well, so my understanding is, and I've read the licenses, the non-derivatives license still includes what all the Creative Commons licenses include, which is necessary that marks of endorsement are removed unless you have endorsed a new version.
But I want us to check the translations.
Sure.
So that's what our position is.
What I'm asking is, I'd like to just, if you could explain a little more about what your concerns would be if you used a free license for those works.
I want to make sure the translations are correct. Now, with a program, it's not up to me to decide whether somebody else's version is correct. If he's going to use it, his version needs to be correct for him, not for me, because it exists to serve the user of it. But a work that states my views exists to present my views, not some other views.
Well, the other clause that's included in the Creative Commons licenses says that the altered version would need to be marked as an altered version.
I don't know if that's enough. So this is where I stand.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you so much for coming to Portland. I was incredibly thrilled this morning when I found out about the talk.
You found out only this morning?
Yes, because...
That's bad. Maybe that reflects what caused the audience to be so few people. I have a feeling that the publicity was not sufficient.
I would agree with that statement.
Very sad.
But we found out through GNU Social and the Free Software Foundation account on there.
Sorry, you found out through what?
GNU Social.
Oh.
So distributed social networking. If anyone's familiar with that, should check it out. So over dinner, my partner and I were talking a little bit about copyleft, and today it's really thrilling with the launch of copyleft.org. Now, particularly, we've been seeing lately these, what I like to call forced upon us trade agreements, the so-called free trade agreements, which really are being forced.
They're free exploitation agreements.
Yeah, exactly. They're being forced upon us in secret and such. The Trans-Pacific Partnership, for anyone who doesn't know, and so on.
It's called the Trans-Pacific Partnership because the leaders that sign it obviously will have been in a trance. And then the one with the U.S. and Europe, this treaty is plutocratic.
Oh,
TTIP.
I like it.
They used to call it TAFTA, which stood for Turn All Freedom to Ashes.
You have the best snarky twists on all these acronyms. However, my question deals with these and the possible effects on copyleft in the United States. Could these have a detrimental effect on copyleft?
They won't hurt copyleft. If they increase copyright power, they won't hurt copyleft. They'll just hurt all of us.
But as you said before in the presentation, corporate interests are going to do anything they can to squeeze as much out of us in the name of profit.
Right.
So
But the point is, if they strengthen the power of the copyright holder, it's not likely to make copyleft harder to carry out.
Because
it will do harm in other ways.
But so far, the GPL has stood up pretty well in court, and
yes.
I would just really hate to see that undermined by.
I don't think it will be, which is not to say that those treaties will be acceptable. Therefore, if there's one kind of harm that they don't do, that doesn't make them legitimate. Those treaties are evil. The existing ones need to be torn up.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your stay in Portland.
The World Trade Organization, by interfering with the production of generic drugs, has committed mass murder. The leaders of the World Trade Organization should be put on trial for this, along with Clinton and the Congress critters that voted for it.
I don't want to hijack the forum, but I have 4 questions. I volunteer at Free Geek, and I heard you were down there earlier today, and I'd like to hear your reaction to Free Geek, if you have.
Well, Free Geek is basically doing a good thing, but there are a couple of problems. First of all, they're using a gnu+linux distribution, which includes a lot of non-free programs. And, I suppose some of those it might be because they're drivers and they make some of the machines work. But the non-free programs, I think they're using gnu+linux Mint. Is that right?
That sounds right.
Yeah. Well, that includes non-free user-level programs. I think does it include Flash Player? Yeah, that's malware. So the point is, they should change that. They shouldn't be leading people towards running these non-free programs. And then they're also distributing Macintoshes with SmackOS. Now, you could install gnu+linux in a Macintosh. That's the only ethical way to distribute it. So, for the most part, what Free Geek is doing is good, but it's not entirely good. They should change these things.
Second question, if I may. I've gone to Ward Cunningham's wiki. He's the inventor of the wiki at c2.com. And one of the things I've noticed is with regard to Lisp, there's a page about people who really love Lisp, and it's huge. And there's a page about people who really hate Lisp, and it's huge. But I don't see that for any other languages. And I hear things like you're a Lisp weenie, or Lisp is a transformative experience. And since you're into Lisp, I'm wondering if you have a take on why it's a transformative experience, and why.
I'll tell you why.
And wait, and why there's such a strong reaction either way.
I don't know why there are people who dislike Lisp. I can't understand them. But I can tell you what makes Lisp more powerful than the other programming languages. It's that, first of all, it has a very simple syntax, simple and regular. Second, it has the virtue of simple, very general orthogonal data types. Instead of the idea that you'll define a data type for each piece of data, it has a few data types which are fundamentally different in their algorithmic properties. And then you make structures by putting them together. And the lists can hold any kind of data. An array in Lisp can hold any kind of data. Every structuring object it has can hold anything at all. So you don't need to define lots of different types of lists. You just have lists. And then you could have lots of convenient functions to do all sorts of fancy things with lists of anything. and Lisp goes far beyond other languages in this. But the best thing is programs are data in a very simple, structured way that makes it possible conveniently to operate on programs as data. So Lisp macros, the Lisp macro is a function that's called with the macro call expression as an argument. And then it can take that apart and make another expression, just operating on it simply directly as Lisp data, and then the equivalent expression gets used. You can't do this kind of thing in other languages. They don't have these concepts. Lisp, when it starts up, gives you a read, eval, print loop. Read means you type in something in characters and it gets converted to data, which represent the program you typed in. Then eval takes the data that stands for a program and executes it and gives back the value. And then print converts that value to text. In Lisp, unlike most languages, you can actually print a whole structure made up of many objects. Well, most languages don't have read, they don't have eval, and they don't have print, because they don't have the kinds of structure that make those things meaningful. So once you've learned Lisp, every other language will seem to be missing something.
Great. And on this, is everything you just said apply to Clojure, a dialect of Lisp?
I don't remember. A lot of it does, but some of it doesn't, I recall. I think it does. I think it represents programs as data, but it doesn't have the same Lisp data types that are very flexible. But I think so, but I'm not sure. I remember I looked at Clojure and I saw that in some ways it was like Lisp, but in some way it fell short. But I don't remember the details, because I never used it.
At least I infer you're not hostile to it by virtue of the fact that it runs on the Java virtual machine or the common language
I don't care
runtime.
about that. That's
Okay.
an implementation detail.
Okay, so my final question, hopefully along a humorous line, given the fact that you were possibly overly saccharine with regard to the GNU doll, I'm wondering if the Muppet Show, where they had the GNU song, ever influenced your decision to use GNU?
I don't think I ever saw Muppets.
Okay. Very well then, thank you.
I'm too old.
You
They
might be
didn't
just
exist
right.
when I was a child.
Anyway, there's a great,
And I don't know which song you're talking about.
it's from the original Muppet Show, I'm a GNU, spelled G-N-U, and I've always wondered if that had some influence
No.
on you.
Well, actually, there's a song about it that may be the same song. It was a song sung by Flanders and Swan. The nicest work of nature in the zoo.
That sounds comparable.
Oh, well, maybe it's the same. Maybe they use the same song. Yeah, I did hear that song.
So any influence on the name of your legal entity?
Not very much. First of all, it's not a legal entity. It's an operating system. GNU is an operating system. That's the thing to remember.
I'm going to quit while I'm ahead.
What?
I'm going to stop now.
Point is, the operating system most people mean when they say Linux is what GNU is. There's also the GNU project, which is the project to develop GNU. And there are GNU licenses, which are licenses we develop to release the programs of GNU. And the programs that are released specifically to be part of GNU, they're called GNU packages. So, of course, there are various things associated with this operating system, and we also call them GNU this or that. But if you just say GNU, you're talking about this operating system, not a project, not a movement, not a legal entity, not a license. It's an operating system.
Thank you.
How do you feel about non-disclosure agreements, such as national security letters?
National security what? Couldn't hear you.
Whatever those things are that where they
Oh, did
say
you
is
say
like you must spy
national
on people
security
and
letters?
I think that's what it's called.
They're not agreements. Massive general surveillance is tyranny. It's incompatible with democracy. Take a look at gnu.org/philosophy/surveillance-vs-democracy.html. I don't have time to go into all that here.
Can you repeat that?
gnu.org/philosophy/surveillance-vs-democracy.html. We always put dashes between words.
Do you have thoughts on other kinds of things as far as secrecy?
Well, it depends. I will not sign a non-disclosure agreement about generally useful technical information, such as useful software. On the other hand, I wouldn't see anything wrong in agreeing to keep someone's customer list secret. That's not generally useful information.
So you'd have issues with, say, a developer of a driver signing an agreement as far as how a piece of hardware works as far as the interface for making the driver?
Well, the one who's doing wrong is the one who demands the non-disclosure agreement. If you're willing to sign the non-disclosure agreement in order to make the driver, which will be free software, then it's okay, because the necessary information will be in the code that you release. I'd still say they're wrong to require you to sign it, but I would say, okay, go ahead and sign it if you need to so you could make this free driver, because then we'll all be able to use the driver and we won't have to sign a non-disclosure agreement.
Thank you.
So lately, software as a service is an increasingly prevalent sort of way of people using software. And the affair of GPL, goes a long ways to address sort of extend the ethical commitment of the GPL to this software as a service use, right? So something that I've thought down the line is, how do we address the ethical commitment of software to people who don't use it in a conventional sense but are affected by it? For example,
okay, but let me address this.
Okay.
There are many kinds of services that do many kinds of things. Some of them, but many of them are not really like using a program. We wouldn't say that that user might as well be using any program. Which program would it even be? For instance, a chat server. The people were talking to the chat server and talking to each other through it, but they couldn't do that by running a program. So this server is not equivalent to any program. But there's some cases where the server is just a way for people to run a particular program without having a copy of it. That's unjust, and you should reject that completely. Because in those cases, the computing you're doing is your own computing. If you had a copy of the program, you could, and it were free software, you could run it and it would be under your control. That's the only ethical way. For them to deny you control of the program by having you run their copy is wrong. We call that service as a software substitute. And that's the case that's wrong, because the service is substituting for letting you have a copy of a program and run it. But there are other kinds of servers that do other kinds of things which don't replace a program, like the chat server. People couldn't chat by each one running a copy of a program. They wouldn't be talking to each other that way. So basically, we can distinguish between the activities that are your own computing and the activities that are not your own computing. If it's your computing, the only way that respects your freedom is if you're running your copy of a free program. But if it's not your own computing, if it's a joint activity with other people, you couldn't have total control over it anyway, no matter what. And there's no reason you should if it's a joint activity. Why should you be the one who has all the control? So in those cases, I won't say a server is wrong, although the best way to do them is peer-to-peer.
Okay.
Hello. Thank you for all the information you're giving us today. First question I have for you is, why do you think Vim is such an amazing text editor?
I don't particularly think it is, but I've never used it myself.
Kind of a joke. Real question is this. So I'm trying to draw the line between just functioning and being a free software advocate, just kind of functioning in my day-to-day life. How do you rationalize or cope with the fact that when you get into an automobile or you fly on an airplane, that the software that's in the computer and the car that you're in is running on proprietary software?
Well, first of all, I don't own a car or an airplane.
Right on.
So the issues don't directly apply to me. I'm not the victim.
Okay, me neither. That's
But
great.
yeah, but basically, it is bad that cars are filled with proprietary software, and it's horribly badly designed, insecure software too. And somebody found a way that by sticking a CD into the music player, it was possible to sabotage the car. They say because our whole scheme of design is so terribly insecure, we've got to stop people from changing the software. Well, software that's never going to be changed at all, you can treat it as a circuit. But that's not what's going on here, because they want to be able to change it. They just don't want to let you change it, and that's always an injustice.
Okay, thank you.
Hello. Thank you very much. Very interesting talk. I just wanted to ask you a quick question. At work, I'm learning an object-oriented programming language, Java. And as you were speaking tonight, I was wondering what your thoughts are on Oracle's ownership of the language and how they...
Well, that was a very bad decision. We're going to ask the Supreme Court not to rule on it because it's like betting either 100 times as much or nothing after you've already lost. But it was a misguided and harmful decision. No one should be allowed to effectively own an API.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name's John, and first question, don't worry, I only got two.
It's getting late, so I'll take your question, but I don't want to take more. I'm sorry.
All right, well, I'll only have one. I've thought
Yeah.
about switching to Linux Mint, and I was wondering what your
It's
general
not
thoughts
Linux,
on it are.
it's GNU/Linux Mint.
Sorry. GNU/Linux Mint, and I was wondering if it fit in with your general philosophies at all.
It
'Cause I've
doesn't, because
enjoyed
it
your talk so
contains
much.
non-free programs. It offers non-free programs to the user. If you look at its list of packages, some of them are non-free. That's
Okay.
why I object to it.
Okay, good to know.
Aside
Thank you
from
very
that,
much.
it's also treating us badly because they don't call it GNU/Linux Mint. They call the system Linux, which is giving Mr. Torvalds credit for our larger work, which is not nice to us. But that's a secondary issue. How they treat the users is the important issue.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I can't answer more questions. I got to get out of here. It's
Well, thanks
late for
anyway.
me. I would answer more but anyway, there is still the opportunity to buy stuff from the FSF. The gear is out there, or make a donation, or join the FSF. Sorry, but it is getting very late. Happy hacking.